Hey, so what do you guys think a Bowie knife is actually good for? You know, the movies portray these things as these larger than life weapons that can pretty much carry you through any conflict. Something you can carry with you, and it's gonna save your life every time. But that's in the movies, and it's always fun to watch that kind of stuff. There's a few movie characters that have really stuck with me that I'm thinking of right now that all they carried was a big knife. And the movies that I'm thinking of right now, I'm thinking of Crocodile Dundee and Rambo First Blood. Those two movies, for some reason, have stuck with me. I've rewatched them so many times, at least Rambo First Blood. Those movies made the biggest impression on me.
Oh, he's got a knife.
That's a knife.
So if you've never seen Crocodile Dundee, there's this character named Mick. He's from the outback of Australia. He's this rugged guy. He comes to the big city of New York. I think it's New York. Anyway, he comes to the U.S. and he carries this big old knife with him. And he has all these little backwoods tricks that he does to survive the streets of New York. So you see this one scene, this little punk comes up to him with a switchblade, tries to rob him. Well, he pulls out his Bowie knife and just carves up this guy's shirt. He doesn't kill him, doesn't stick him, whatever, but he carves up his jacket. And that guy turns tail and runs. I don't think this little street kid ever seen a knife that big. And in that moment, that was a really cool scene. Plus, he had this girl with him, and he saved the day. So, and if you've seen Rambo First Blood, the movie starts out with him carrying that big Bowie knife. He gets this cop this cop takes him into jail, and that's when you first see this big knife. And so that's his like main tool that he carries. It's kind of like his EDC. He always keeps it with him. He was kind of living out of a duffel bag, and this cop just comes up to him and arrests him not just for kind of looking dirty, walking through a town, you know, a small town type of situation. And it ends up being his main survival tool throughout the movie. And he does get into some bigger weapons. You know, it gets really nuts at the end, but that Bowie knife is so iconic in that Rambo First Blood movie. So my interest was with that Rambo First Blood movie. I started doing some research. I started looking to see if I can even find that knife on the internet, if I can still buy it. I didn't know if it was ever for sale. So I have some stories about when I was a kid of thinking I was getting that Rambo knife. But anyway, so I did some research and I found a couple things. I found out that the original designer, his name was Jimmy Lyle, and he was an Arkansas knife maker. He was a professional. And evidently the movie producers, whoever it is, they actually tasked him to create this knife. And him and Stallone actually have pictures together. You can see him. They probably worked together to design this knife. And he's a real craftsman. He's a legitimate knife maker, and there's just not that many knife makers anymore. But anyway, the story is really cool because they come up with their First Blood. They come up with the knife from the First Blood, and they actually end up working together on the second movie to kind of redesign the knife. I'm not too sure the big difference between the first movie and the second knives. I know the handle color changed for some reason. That's one thing I can remember. Anyway, so James, or Jimmy is his name. He passed away a long time ago, but his knife, his name, all that, his company is still alive and well, from what I understand. You can still order one of those knives and still get that good quality has been passed on with the new company that's still living. But let me tell you though, those knives are very, very expensive. I'm not sure how many of those they sell or the market for high-end knives. I know people make them, so somebody's buying these high-end knives out there. So what I saw is these knives are about $2,000 for an original Jimmy Lyle knife. So I think they go up to like $2,500. So it's pretty amazing. I would have one if I could get one. So don't get me wrong there, but it's a piece of history if you really appreciate that type of thing. I mean, if you spend that $2,000, I mean, you're gonna pass that knife down for generations. It's a pretty neat thing to have. That's something I really appreciate about Stallone, his movies. He really gets into the props. He seems to be heavily involved with, some of the cars that's in these movies, the weapons, his training, his physique, everything is very much concentrated, or he's really focuses on putting the best, most realistic things in his movies, but still making it very entertaining, of course. So for me, I've always had this interest in those Rambo movies ever since I was a little kid, and actually wanted to get one of those knives. So I found there was an advertisement. I was 8 or 10 years old. there's an advertisement in the back of I think it was a Boys Life magazine. It was like a Boy Scout magazine or something I used to get. And in the back, they had all these advertisements for equipment and tools, knives, camping gear, all that stuff you can think of. And there was a knife in there, and it was like a survival knife. It looked just like the one from the movie. It didn't have the name on it, but it was a big Bowie knife. At least it looked big, and it had a compass on the handle, and the end of the handle would screw off where the compass is, and you could store some stuff down inside the handle. It was just a really cool knife, and it was amazing. And I think the knife was like 12 or 11 or $12. So that was a lot of money back then for me. And so I don't know how I came up with the money or how I got it, but I know I got it. And so I got that knife, and I really put it through its paces, and I probably never sharpened it very good. I wasn't very good with sharpening back then. And so I remember bending that blade at some point, and the knife was completely ruined. And that was my last memory of that knife. Probably, I don't know if I lost it or got rid of it, but it was cheap. The blade didn't even go into the handle. It was just like attached to the top of the handle. It was more or less, this knife, the knife that I bought was more or less a little flea market knife, some piece of junk. But for me as a kid, I was, it was the greatest thing in the world at the time. So that's a good memory for me, getting to mess around, do some chopping, and have some fun with that knife. So you can buy that original Jimmy Lyle Rambo knife. But I also saw on Amazon that there's like a knockoff knife on there, and I read some reviews on it, and it's not a very good knife. There's a lot of bad things saying about it being a knockoff. But I was thinking actually about building a shadow box, something for like a display to have in my house, like a Rambo First Blood movie poster with some equipment in there, maybe that knife, just some things, just to remember the movie. People will put together a glass case that's kind of trimmed out in wood. That was kind of what I was wanting to do. So if you're wanting to build a shadow box or have a display, that cheaper version may be good for that. But it's not something you want to go chopping around with, because what I read, it's not any good for that. So that's your other option. So it's just too bad they don't have a knife that's somewhere in between in price range. Maybe a couple $100, I don't know, but just something that was a little more affordable. That way you could actually have that original knife. I've really been wanting to add a Bowie knife to my collection. I didn't have one for a long time, except for that little cheap one I had when I was a kid. And I wouldn't even characterize that as a Bowie knife. I think the blade was only like maybe 8 inches on it or something like that. I just had a couple of prerequisites for this knife. For a Bowie knife, for me, I just want something that I can afford, of course, something I can buy. It's not gonna be a big burden for me financially. And also, I wanted something that looked good. I have a certain idea of the kind of knife that I want. I don't like these whimsical looking knives that look like something out of a sci-fi movie that have, like the hand guards. Sometimes they'll have these crazy like points and shapes and designs, and I don't like a knife that's too fancy. I don't mind like a polished blade or something like that. That's cool with me. But so I was kind of looking for an aesthetic too, but I also wanted something that was practical, that I could actually get out and chop with it and just have some fun with it and not worry about it falling apart or breaking when I'm doing some cutting or just having some fun with it. So after doing some research, I settled on the 1917 Frontier Bowie by Cold Steel. I saw this knife and I was like, that is a great looking knife. That is something that looks like a cowboy or a survivalist or a mountain man, somebody who's an adventure seeker may have designed or wanted to carry, back in the 1900s. It's just a beautiful looking knife. The handle on it just looks very, very simple and sturdy. The whole knife just looks amazing. And my only complaint about it when I got it was the sheath. Sheath is a little whimsical to me. It's got like this metal tip on it, on the end of the sheath. It's for protection. It has a purpose, but other than that, the knife is just amazing. This thing's got like a 1/4-inch blade, and the length of the blade is a little over 12 inches, I think. And it's got a great little grip. It has has like a little 45-degree angle curve at the bottom of the grip. It really sits in your hand really good, and a nice little hand guard. And it has just enough design to it so it looks nice, but it's also not too fancy. But man, I I can think of a lot of movies right now that somebody could have carried that knife. But I think the only downside is in movies they don't like to put a dark bladed knife. And this Bowie, this cold steel Bowie has like a blued blade, which is something I don't see too often. I don't know if you guys, I'll see some different coatings on knife blades, like some pocket knives, and I know that the bluing I've used to seeing that on firearms, things like that. But I just can't think of any of my other knives that have a bluing on it like that. Most of them will have some type of coating, but I'm not sure it's the same as bluing. But man, it looks good. So hopefully it works out good for me, and it'll be a good knife and a good investment for me. So you're probably wondering, what are you going to do with this Bowie knife? Are you just going to buy it, put it on the shelf, or are you just going to just have it just to say you have it, or maybe it's for self-defense, something like that? Well, for me, this knife is a novelty for me. Like, for me, I plan on just doing some chopping when I go out in the woods. Just take it with me and cut down some sapling trees. Just have some fun with it. And I really plan on bringing it out like at family gatherings, maybe Thanksgiving when you guys are doing silly stuff, cutting up a turkey, or even this summer I was going to cut up some watermelons with it. But it's just a little novelty thing that you bring out when you have family gatherings or special events. And, everybody has that crazy uncle or a friend that on the 4th of July, he has this crazy, fireworks display or a weird shotgun or something that's just kind of an entertainment thing for the family. It's just something to do, to mess around with. So I think it'll just be a fun little novelty for me to have. And it's functional too. I plan on using it when I can. I want to see if I can slice some brisket with it. The blade's kind of thick, so it may not be the best for slicing meat, for slicing a brisket or something like that. But I'm going to give it a shot. I've already been cutting some watermelon, some branches. I was slicing up my banana tree, having some fun with that, and I was cutting through some cans. I filled up some cans full of water, and I was just slicing them right in half, just to see what that chopping power could do. And that was kind of fun for me. It was just fun for me to see how sharp this thing was and to see what it can do. And I was cutting some water bottles in half because that's just always fun to do, right? And definitely the fall's coming up, so I'm definitely going to be doing some pumpkin carving. So I'm going to try to carve a pumpkin at the beginning of fall. And if it doesn't turn out too good, I'm just going to chop it all to pieces and probably just blow it apart with this knife and just have fun destroying it. But hey, hopefully I'll be able to post some pictures coming up pretty soon when they start selling pumpkins around, and I'll carve one up. And it's probably not going to be the most detailed if I'm going to use a Bowie knife, but as far as the top part that you cut off on your pumpkin, I think this knife would be good just to go and open up the top and maybe make some bigger openings. It's not going to be like a real detailed, pumpkin. So, but it'll be fun to do. And when that thing starts to wilt on me, I'm just going to slice it. I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to blow through it with my knife and just have some fun with that. So I mentioned earlier, I really don't like those whimsical knives, the ones that look like you'd see in a flea market or just at some trade show or something where people are just selling a bunch of, weird stuff. But man, the blade on this thing has like the perfect shape to it. This blade has just the right amount of curve to it, and the handle guard has a little slight curve to it. I mean, it's just like a perfectly designed knife to me. And you could do some sticking with it. I was doing a little bit. I was just sticking it in some wood to see how it felt. And it has a nice point to it, and it feels nice and strong. So it actually has a really good blade design. It's not just a big, heavy knife. When I was doing my chopping, my cutting, I could really feel that grip, that little curve in the grip really felt secure down at the bottom of my grip. I really felt like I was going to be able to hang on to that heavy knife. And it just gave me a little bit of extra confidence that when I was swinging it, it wasn't going to fly out of my hand. So that's a nice little that's a nice little design. And when I was looking at Bowie knives, I noticed that a lot of them don't even have a curve or any type of plate or anything on the bottom of the grip. And I'm just wondering how those knives are to hang on to, because if you have such a heavy knife, you think you would want something there to kind of hold it in your hand when you're swinging it. So I'm not sure if you guys have a Bowie knife that just has a straight handle. Just let me know how it is to swing it and operate it. I mean, this is my first one, but I have seen the other ones and some of them actually look pretty nice, but I just don't know how they perform. So I'm kind of curious to see how those go. So like I was saying earlier, I really wasn't crazy about the sheath, and that's probably the only thing on this knife I would change is kind of maybe update that sheath, maybe just modify it. I don't know if I need to replace it. I mean, I definitely don't need to, but it might be nice just to add some little details to it. And there's that little point. You'll see that little point on the end of the sheath. I could just cut that thing off. I don't know if it's really serving a purpose, but it actually might be there to hold maybe some thread, because I know usually when you carry a big knife in a sheath, usually have it tied to your leg somehow. That way you can draw it out a little easier. And so maybe that's there. But you would think it would be a loop or something, to a loop for some string, but it's just a little point. So I'm not sure about that. But what I've been doing, I've had it attached to my belt, and I've just been grabbing the sheath with my left hand and drawing out the knife with my right. It's kind of hard to draw out just one-handed. So that's something that a little string might help, you know. So, and keep in mind, you're gonna want a really sturdy belt with this knife. This thing is pretty heavy. The sheath is pretty big and bulky. I've got one of those like tactical style belts, and I've had it for like 4 or 5 years. And it's really sturdy and strong. I think it's a 511 tactical, and so if you're gonna carry a knife like this, even if you're not carrying it every day, just for special events and stuff, you're gonna need a good belt. Trust me, the thing's heavy, and it's gonna be pulling on you. So what movie could you imagine this knife being in? There's a lot of famous knives like I talked about earlier in these movies, but so this 1917 Bowie, like what does it look like to you? Like where could you imagine it? A couple of movies. One of the movies I thought of right away was the Terminator movie, where the Terminator he lands on Earth, whatever the story is, and he gets to that bar, and he goes into that biker bar and he beats up 3 or 4 bikers because he's butt naked. He doesn't have anything, doesn't have any clothes. So he gets in there, he gets some clothes, he gets I think he gets a shotgun, some sunglasses, some leathers, and a Fat Boy motorcycle. And but I think the one thing missing is a sweet knife. Like, he really needs a nice knife to go with that whole biker get up. So if you're a biker, this is your knife. I don't know if it's legal to carry it. That's some states it is, some states it isn't. I don't know. But that would have made an awesome prop for that movie, which is, it's kind of ironic because the Terminator really doesn't need any weapons because he's pretty much like invincible. But I think it would have been a nice little addition to it. This Frontier has it has over a 12-inch blade. I think this thing would have been an awesome zombie killer. So The Walking Dead this would have been a great knife for The Walking Dead. Any of those characters would have loved to have found this knife on taking it off a dead person, or found it and start carrying it, because they're in a survival situation anyway. So I think this knife would have been a great addition to that show. Hey guys, let me know if you have a favorite Bowie knife. I've had a lot of fun with this one, and it's really been fun doing research and learning about them. And so let me know if you guys have a favorite one and how your experience was with it. Hey, if you guys are interested in this Bowie knife that I got, I'll put a link for it down in the description, so if you guys want to check it out. Thanks for taking your time today to watch this video. I appreciate you subscribing, but I'll see you soon.